Greetings and welcome to this tutorial on how to use color adjustment layers to render your digital art. If what I just said makes no sense, don't worry, I'll explain everything you need to know in the next few minutes. What we cover here is of course just one of many ways to render your art, and I will do my best to cover more methods in other videos. For now though, we're going to focus on color adjustment layers, and by the end of the video, you'll be ready to start rendering your own artwork using this method. I use a program called Krita for digital art, but the tools you see in this video are pretty universal in digital painting programs, though the names of the tools may vary. If you're unsure about how to accomplish this method in your own program, drop a message in the comments and I'll happily help you out. By the way, I'm Charlie. I'm glad you showed up and we're going to make some art. Okay, here we are. We are ready to start learning how to use color adjustment layers to render our art. One of my original characters, Onyx, has kindly offered to help us out with this video. Both his line art and his flats are done already, which means we are ready to render. So before we start rendering anything, we can help ourselves out by placing a light source, by determining where the light is going to be coming from. So let's get up here. I'll make a new layer. I'll just go ahead and use this gold color, and we'll pretend that the light source is coming from up here. And we draw an arrow. It just helps remind me where the source of light is going to be coming from, so we know where to put the highlights and we know where to put the shadows, because the highlights are going to be on the same side as the light source, the shadows are going to be on the opposite side. Okay, so we've got our transparency mask set up, we've got a group named color adjustment just to help keep things organized, we've got a blank layer here that is just there, and then I'm going to come back to the flats, I'm going to copy them, I'm going to put them in our color adjustment group, and they can stay as a group. I'm just going to go ahead and merge them here so that I don't have to deal with another group. And now we're ready to add our first color adjustment layer. I come down here, open that menu for adding a new layer, and then I'm going to add a filter mask, which is going to add a new layer. Okay, there's our new layer. It's all white right now because it's a mask, so everything that's white we'll be able to see, but we're going to come back to that. So we've got a bunch of options here. We're going to go under Adjust and come down to Color Adjustments. Slide this over so you can see it. And this actually, without getting into too much detail, represents the colors on the canvas right now, or relationships to the colors on the canvas. So if I come to this line and I drop an anchor point here in the middle by just clicking on it and drag it down, it makes everything darker. If I go the opposite direction, it makes everything lighter. So what we're going to do for now is drag it down a little bit, and this is actually going to be our shadows. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Right now this filter mask is being applied to the flats, which works perfectly fine. I'm actually going to drag it out, which you do not have to do. You could leave it down there, but I just like to see it all stacked on the same level. So remember that this is a mask, and everything on this layer is white at the moment. So if when we have that layer selected, we paint in black, what do we think is going to happen? It's actually going to bring us back to our flat colors because we're hiding what we did. And we can see those lines that I drew in black is hiding the adjustment layer, masking it out so that we can see what's underneath. And now it looks like Onyx is standing in some blinds or something like that. Because the filter mask is applied to the whole canvas, all we have to do is paint in black or white on this layer, and we can add shadows or remove them. I'm going to open up the fill tool here. I have the color black selected. I'm just going to fill this all with black for now so that it's hidden, and then we can paint back in shadows by painting in white, which will reveal the filter mask. Just like that. And our light source is up here in the upper right. So anything that's kind of on the opposite side of that, and I have to be a little careful here around the tea bag. But anything over here, that would be darker. This side of his face would probably be darker because the light source isn't reaching it. Have a little shadow over here, so on and so forth. So if we were able to do that for the shadows, we can do the same thing for the highlights. So we'll just come over here, select my flattening layer again, add a filter mask. We're under adjust. We got the color adjustment selected here. But we're back on with our line and our grid. Put an anchor in the middle, and instead of going down, I'm going to go up. About that far, that seems fine. I'm going to pull this out. And then everything's brighter now. I'm going to fill the whole mask with black, so all of that goes away. Get my brush back, go to white, and now I can paint highlights. And I'm just using the color white. So without having to know color theory or even pick colors at all, we've been able to add shadow and highlights to our art. What we have right now kind of looks like cell shading or like a comic book. It's simple and it has hard edges. If that is a style that you're going for, then you can stop here. If you want to make it look a little bit more realistic, we can do that too. I've been using this very simple round brush to apply this shading, but if we switch to, say, a brush with some texture, like this dry bristle brush, for example, and come back, I'm going to select white, we're on our shadow layer, then I can work back and forth with black and white to kind of smooth some of these out and make it look a little bit more detailed. And if I feel like I've applied too much, so I've got white selected now, which is going to bring the shadows through, and then I can switch to black, either by coming over here and selecting it, or Krita has this handy thing to set the foreground color and the background color to black or white, and I can switch quickly between them by pressing the X key on my keyboard. So now we've got white selected, we'll go back to black, we can soften some of this up, or just remove it. So now, instead of having those hard edges or those kind of simple shapes, we are able to kind of just switch back and forth, soften them up, and make them feel a little bit more realistic. Just like that. Let's come up here onto his face and smooth some of those out, because we don't really get those hard edges in real life very often. Okay, depending on the light source. Now we can do the same thing with the highlights. Soften some of those. Got white selected to add them. Smooth them out. If I do a little bit too much, I can take it down again. And the key thing here that is helping me is just that I'm using a brush that does not apply full opacity right away. And that is very helpful in creating these more smooth edges. And we just go back and forth. And this is the part of rendering that takes the longest. We can actually keep repeating this addition of adjustment layers, and I'm going to name this one highlights really quick. I'm going to name this other one shadows. And maybe we want some really, really dark areas. So I can add a filter mask. And maybe I just want to add dark shadows to the areas that are already dark. So I'll come down here where the value is darker, add an anchor point and drag that down. Say OK. And pull this guy out. I've got black selected. Grab my fill tool while I'm still on that filter mask. I'm going to fill the whole thing with black. And now I'm going to paint on it. So I've got black selected. Go back to white, just pushed X. Now I can bring through those much darker areas, like in his hand there where things are kind of overlapping. And that adds a lot of dimension. Now it's more interesting because we have a greater range of values. Okay, and you can do the same thing with the highlights if you want to. Let's also say that maybe you want the highlights to be brighter than they are. I'm going to right click on the layer, I'm going to go to properties. This is going to look a little different than the other menu, but we have the same grid here. And let's say my highlights are not bright enough. I can actually come in here and just adjust that layer without having to repaint everything, which is very helpful. Because it's a masking layer, it's very easy to adjust that and arrange it in such a way that makes us happy. But because we've been painting in black and white on the masking layer, we don't have to repaint anything, but we can still make those adjustments. And that is how you can use color adjustment layers to render your digital art. This method is extremely handy, and it's not necessary to understand exactly what's going on behind the scenes to use it, though that information is absolutely out there for those who want to know. The color adjustment layer method won't really deliver the most realistic render in the world because it's not quite following the principles of color theory, which is an extremely complex topic. But what it does give us definitely looks more awesome than the flats by itself. Like I said in the beginning, there's more methods for rendering digital art that I'm going to tackle in other videos, but if there's something specific you want to learn how to do, or you just have questions or comments in general, leave a comment below. I hope this was helpful, and thank you for watching.